Greetings. I'm Thomas Caldwell of the Aurelian Column, and this is the Book Report. Biographies and autobiographies of historic characters are always wonderful insights into what happened way back when, from the perspective of those that made things happen way back when. A lot of them these days are rather self-serving. Mostly politicians hire some ghostwriter to go out and write their life story, even though nobody bothers to read it. But back in the day, such books were considered the only place to really find out what happened from the person that was there. And sometimes these books have amazing tales that are tied to them. Now, there's one book on the Civil War, which I have not read until recently, and that's what I'm reporting on today. Now, Americans love the Civil War, and I don't mean the one that might be happening soon. I'm talking about the one that happened from 1861 to 1865. There's a massive demand for any story from that period. It's a part of our culture. It made us the country we became. But the one book that I never read, and I'm very glad I finally got around to it, was the personal memoirs of Ulysses S. Grant. Now, for those of you overseas who may or may not know the history of this country's rather tumultuous bloodbath from 1861 to 1865, the war between the states, the war to end slavery, although there was a lot more to it than just that, 2% of our population was slaughtered, and many more were made to suffer. Well, the general of the Union, the federal government, the side that won was Ulysses S. Grant, a fascinating character out of history, and a man who really should be up there with George Washington or Abraham Lincoln, who he did work with or work for, or any of our other heroes from the past, because it was because of him that the United States stayed together. Now, I'm reviewing his book, which originally came out in 1885 and 1886 in 2 volumes. The edition I read was from ASA Books, which came out in 2022, along with the audiobook that was put out by Blackstone, which is available up on Audible through Amazon. And I got to tell you something, I usually stay away from old books, because they tend to be very hard to read. They tend to be very, stodgy and also poorly written, because back then people didn't edit as well as they should have. But this book is quite different, and I was delighted by it, probably because one of America's greatest literary giants had a hand in its production, and that was Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens. Let me tell you the story of how the book came about, because it was never going to be written. It was written out of necessity. After the Civil War, Ulysses S. Grant was elected president in 1868. He did 2 terms. It wasn't a very successful presidency. He was an honest man who thought everybody else was honest, and there was so much corruption in his administration, it became, quite literally a national scandal. After that, he and his wife went on a trip around the world. He came back, settled in New York City, had to find some way to make money, but unfortunately tied up with the late 1800s equivalent of Bertie Madoff, lost everything, and was broke. Back then, presidents didn't get pensions like they do now. Anyways, he had to find a way to make some money, and a company approached him to write his memoirs, and he agreed. But then his friend Samuel Clemens, who knew the publishing business really, really, really well, came down to New York City, and according to the story, Grant was just about to sign a contract for getting only 10% of income from a rather sleazy publishing operation, and Mr. Clemens was able to put a stop to that and was able to put together a real good deal. This was very important and very, very timely, because very recently, Mr. Grant, the 18th President of the United States, had been diagnosed with throat cancer, which was not treatable with surgery, and he was going to die rather horribly and rather in agony and he did not want to leave his family behind without any money. Mark Twain was able to put a deal together that was quite sweet, and, well, Mr. Grant went to work on his manuscript. He did that at a location in upstate New York, and he finished the manuscript with some assistance from a few other people 3 days before he died. But the book was published, and his widow collected, in today's money, about $15 million. Now, the book itself is an amazing work. I didn't think it would be as detailed as it was. It is filled with minutia, but it was also filled with very honest commentary from a man who really didn't have anything to lose. He was quite honest, but he was honorable about things. Now, if you're a Civil War geek, you probably have read this already, and if you haven't, you should. He goes into everything like why they had to shoe more horses than usual after a rainstorm, or how many hogs had to be picked up to feed a certain battalion. I mean, the detail here is rather, well, somewhat difficult at times, but every little detail of his campaign and his life up until the end of the Civil War is covered. Now, one of the insights that I read here was fascinating, is he was of the opinion that the Mexican-American War, which is the war that the U.S. was able to grab California and New Mexico, Arizona, and that's an interesting story. He thought that was an evil war, but he was very pointed in thinking that it was the beginning of the American Civil War, because it was fought for money. It was fought to bring slaves into that part of the country if possible. He also was very critical of pre-war Southern politicians who he was quite convinced had arranged for things to be falling into the hands of the Confederacy, things like munitions, weapons, horses, and all sorts of things, because they were planning it long before. That was a fascinating bit of insight. It's a very readable book. It takes a while to read it. It took me about a week and a half to go through it, but I was savoring it. And honestly, it has a lot of minutia that a lot of people might not find interesting. But think of the audience it was written for. There were a lot of Civil War veterans back then, and all of them bought it. Now, the sad thing about this is when I first started reading it as his memoirs, I was looking forward to reading about his presidency and the trip around the world. And when he went around the world to India, Japan, all over Europe, people came from all over to meet him as if he was Jesus or something. I would have loved to have read about that, but unfortunately the book ends pretty much at the end of the Civil War, just afterwards. It doesn't go into his presidency, which was, well, it would be really interesting to get his side of the story, but my belief is that he didn't have time. He was dying, and they decided that let's just get the Civil War story out, and the rest of it, we can't do anything about it. That would have been interesting. So guys out there, if you're interested in writing your memoirs, get to work on it, because you never know how long you have. How difficult it must have been to sit there with a nib pen and handwrite a lot of notes, go through a lot of notes, go through a lot of research other people were doing while cancerous growths are cutting off your throat and your air. He was in agony while he was writing this book for months. It doesn't show in the book, but there has to be testament and respect made to a man who would do that to take care of his family after his demise. It's a must-read book for anyone who has a serious interest in the Civil War. Silly me, I should have read it years ago, but I'm glad I finally got around to it. It's also worth referring to. I've noticed a few things about his talk about slavery, where things would have gone, how things would have gone if Lincoln had survived. I found that quite fascinating. Anyways, I would recommend this one. It's summertime. For some reason, Civil War books do well in the summer. There are many publishers of this book out there, of course, because it is in the public domain. There's many versions out there, but again, the one I picked was put out by ASA Books in 2022, with the Blackstone Audible edition. And that usually is supposed to work in unison, so you can read it, close it, listen to it in your car where you stopped. And for some reason, that didn't work too well. The technology wasn't really working for me in this particular case. But still, it was a great read, and the audiobook I thought was excellent. Again, Personal Memoirs of Ulysses S. Grant by Ulysses S. Grant. The edition I recommend is ASA Books. That was put out in 2022, the Kindle edition. There's also a paperback. There's also audio by Blackstone, available up on Audible. That's it for today. If you appreciate my work, please like, subscribe, and share. Share with your friends and share with your enemies. They like to read too. I can be reached at feedback@aureliancolumn.com. That's feedback@aureliancolumn.com. I'm up on X. My handle there is MICCAMPEN. That's MICCAMPEN. This podcast originates at Substack. My handle there is aureliancolumn.substack.com. Until we meet again, be good, be safe, be vigilant, and remember, keep reading and never judge a book by its movie. Good day